go from here. So first I want to, and Sarah, I don't know both you and Mary very well, so I'm going to let you introduce yourselves a little bit more, but our presenters today come from Able, South Carolina, one of our premier centers in the country. And this center does all kinds of great and exciting things. And one of the things that they're going to share with you is about digital accessibility. So some of their staff shared with us last month about other kinds of accessibility, more related to the physical presence of things. But now they're going to talk with us about digital accessibility, which is an equally important accessibility feature for sure. So I'm going to have Sarah take on here. I'm going to pin you, Sarah. That's what I'm going to do. That's it. And also Mary, and I'll Sarah, let you take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Paula. So just a quick programming note. Mary is out sick today.
Oh,
she is
sorry.
very sad to not be able to be with y'all, especially for those of y'all who had a chance to work with her during our built environment training last month. But yeah, she's got the crud, we think, from one of Able's big fundraising events last week. So just to get us started, my name is Sarah Massengale. As Paula mentioned, I am with Able, South Carolina, and I am a community access specialist. And what I do primarily is a lot of our digital accessibility focused work in our fee-for-service program. So website audits, technical assistance and trainings like the one we're doing here today, and then some document review and remediation. I am totally blind. So in addition to having some certifications to do this work, I also have a lot of lived experience with the work. I use she and her pronouns. And while I am off camera, just a quick visual description. I have short, dark red hair. I am a white woman, about 5.5. I'm very proud of that 1/2 inch. And as I mentioned, I have a visual disability. And so just a couple of housekeeping notes, just for the way I like to do things when I do training in TA. I do a very informal run of show. So if you folks have questions as we go, please feel free to stop me or to chat Paula directly. And Paula, if you're willing to serve as my moderator and read questions, that would be awesome. If folks are not willing to, or not able to speak questions aloud, I do ask that we minimize use of the chat because I am using screen reading software. And so unless you need to chat Paula directly or chat a friend or colleague directly, if we can minimize use of the Zoom chat, that would be awesome. And then the other thing is that I will do periodic check-ins with y'all because I do not have the visual cues of body language and don't read the energy as well in a Zoom room as I might with an in-person training. So periodically, I'm just going to do how are we feeling checks with all of y'all and just ask for some very open, honest feedback, even if that is, hey, slow down, because this is a lot of information. So we have about 30, 45 minutes together today. This is barely going to scratch the surface of the digital accessibility space. So what I'm hoping to do is give you just some starting points with the ability to get in touch with me and the ability to find some resources on your own as you want to learn more. So if we could, let's see.
I'm on the title slide on slide 2, Sarah.
Yes,
and
that
move
is
on
what
when
I
you
am.
want.
All right. if we could skip to slide 6, please. And then not start the animation yet, because I'd like to do a little bit of an interactive activity here.
Okay.
So I apologize for any folks with visual disabilities in the room, because I am going to do bad slide etiquette for a moment, and I am not going to describe to you what is on the screen. But I'm going to ask sighted folks who are comfortable and who are interested in taking a try at this, what is it that you think you are looking at on the screen here?
We're a small enough group, you can speak up or you can drop it in the chat and I'll read it.
Yes, absolutely. Please, very informal run of show. Let's.
So it looks like some sort of information in Braille, but the only letter that I think I recognize is the third one from the left on the top, I believe is a C. Other than that, I have no idea.
You are definitely on the right track. Fabulous. Okay, so I'm going to ask y'all to be a little bit vulnerable with me here for a second. Is looking at this and being put kind of on the spot, is this a touch uncomfortable? Does this make you a touch uneasy?
We did have 4 more answers in the chat out of this big group, so there are 48 of us. I think that means people are a little uneasy. They said Braille, 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 and alphabet.
Yes. So
it's a little uneasy looking at it if you don't know how to read Braille.
So, okay, Paula, go ahead and launch that animation for me.
I don't know how.
Okay, well, there is an animation that would launch with this, and the text says, inclusion benefits everyone. And yes, for those of you who said you're looking at Braille, you're absolutely looking at Braille. And what I was getting at with this exercise is you have just experienced inaccessible content. So keeping in mind that this is something that your staffers with disabilities, that your consumers, whomever you're interacting with disabilities, this inaccessible content is something that I promise you they experience on a daily basis. And so this discomfort is something that we as people with disabilities see on a daily basis. Okay, so let's go to slide 7. And then who are people with disabilities? So disability is the largest minority. Disability intersects every other group of people. 1 in 4 people in the US has a disability. And so as we work through this whole digital accessibility space, keep that framework in mind. All right, next slide. So I know that we glimpsed this slide very briefly, but let's take a stab at this. How do people with disabilities use the internet? Feel free to speak, feel free to drop it in the chat, whichever you would like.
Mostly for the same reasons people without disabilities do.
Exactly. You got it. My entire huge point without going through all the different aspects, but yes, exactly the same way that people without disabilities use the internet. And so we want to, of course, promote that equitable access. to the internet. And so what prevents folks with disabilities from accessing the internet?
Two things that come to mind. One would be physical limitations of just being able to operate the equipment. And the other may be financial considerations, not being able to afford internet access.
Those are excellent ones. Let's think even more micro rather than macro. So maybe it's something as simple as, if you're a person using a screen reader and you are navigating a web page using just the links on that page, and every link on that page says click here, and you don't know where here is. Or you are a person who has difficulty distinguishing between colors, and the color contrast of a website is poor. How are you going to utilize that website?
And Kasara said in the chat, not having accessible devices.
What if you are accessing a social media post and the entire social media post is an image with text in the image? How will you pull information from that image? So there are many, many different things that we have to take into account when we create websites, when we create social media content, even when we create documents, to ensure that our staffers with disabilities, our stakeholders, our consumers, who are our most important stakeholders, and the people we serve, are fully able to access the public-facing content we're putting out. Give me just a second. Technical difficulty. Here we go. All right. So what is digital accessibility? Does anybody want to try their hand at defining this term in plain language? Okay.
Having it in multiple forms.
So yes, that is absolutely one way to do it. But what we hope and what we aim for more than multiple forms is that the singular form of something that we create is fully usable by everybody. So digital accessibility, when you get down to a very technical definition, is all of the considerations when you put them together that combine to ensure that content is fully usable by folks with disabilities, with a variety of disabilities. And we're not just talking equal access here. We're going to go a step further. We're going to talk about equitable access. So making sure that there is equitable access to that content. So we all know in this room that making your digital content accessible is the right thing to do. It's also the law. So as SILs, many of us receive federal funding. And so that means that we have to be compliant with sections 504 and 508 of the Rehab Act, which cover digital accessibility. We're also talking about the ADA. Now, while the ADA doesn't give explicit guidelines for digital accessibility, there is a set of standards that are referred to as the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, that are really kind of seen as the measurement that the ADA uses to govern digital accessibility. It is not the legal standard, but in the world of digital accessibility professionals, when we check websites, when we are talking about whether something is accessible, those guidelines are what we're looking at. Now I'm going to pause for a second because that piece is a lot of information. Are there any questions about how that works?
Again, just speak up or drop it in the chat and I'll read it.
This is Kobe, and I live in a frontier state because it is low population and we're spread apart and we're mostly rural. And a lot of us do not have broadband and water. I mean, it goes the whole gamut. So how do we make digital accessibility relevant to our rural communities?
So for your rural communities, it is a little bit trickier. And what I think I know, and talk me through this because you're going to have the lived experience, is that your folks are likely still accessing some internet through smartphones and through smartphone apps. Am I thinking about this correctly?
And if that individual can't answer, one of you from your other rural areas can certainly jump in.
Yeah,
Is that
absolutely.
true?
Feel free to chime in.
I thought I did unmute myself, sorry.
Oh, there you are.
That's okay.
Yeah, most of the time they can with smartphones. But if the mountains get in the way or the broadband isn't good enough in that section of the state, it doesn't work. And it's unstable. So you have to undo the video in order to talk, or sometimes it freezes and all of that. And a lot of retired folks aren't as familiar as you young folks in using the smartphone and the laptop and all of the rest.
Right. And
Yeah,
so
let's hear what other people say too. I'm sorry. Thank you.
no, please. And I appreciate the fact that you brought this up because I love to do these training and TA sessions with some very healthy discussion. And I think it's important to remember that digital accessibility is not a substitute for alternative formats. Digital accessibility is not a substitute for Braille or large print or audio or any other format that someone is going to want to use to access the content that you're putting out. Digital accessibility is in and of itself another alternative format. Any other thoughts and conversation about that?
Yes.
Anything in the chat?
Just a past comment someone made about using digital technology to communicate and navigate activities of daily living. That was a how people use it comment, but I thought it was a good one.
That's an
Yeah.
excellent one. Yes. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like the digital accessibility space is going to encompass many of those ADLs. It's going to encompass just lots of areas. Yes, the idea of keeping websites simple to minimize bandwidth usage, and simple doesn't always mean non-appealing visually either. There's this misconception in the digital accessibility space that accessible means not visually appealing, that it means, you know, text heavy, as I think is this idea of keeping websites simple. There's a misconception about that too. That is not what it means. It just means you don't have to have a ton of video. You don't have to have the newest, fanciest thing. Just create something easy that folks can use.
Well,
You don't
Sarah,
have to have full sentences either.
Yes.
well said. Sarah, I was looking at slide 8, which is the one we have up right now, and I was thinking about how great a job you did on visual content and visual interest. In fact, in spite of the fact that it's simple, right? Because we've got very simple bullet points. We've got
Yes.
a picture, you know, that's there.
Right.
The guy holding a poster, and we've got your logo, which is simple and doesn't take a lot of bandwidth, but is visually appealing. You know, so I think just that example on the screen is good.
And that's an excellent point, because yes, you do not ever have to sacrifice those visuals. In fact, you know, if given the chance, I'm going to tell you, don't sacrifice those visuals, because
Right.
people learn both visually and auditorily. All right, so if we could, Paula, skip to slide 12. What is assistive technology?
Oops, now you've got it.
Okay, beautiful. So assistive technology, a lot of times when many of us think about it, we think about high-tech solutions. But assistive technology can be anything that is high-tech or low-tech that helps an individual with a disability carry out those ADLs. So for instance, you know, my white cane is assistive tech for me, but so is my screen reader, which is a very advanced software package. So it just depends on who you are and what you need.
A rubber band can be used as a label.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
A rubber band around shampoo can be a label.
Exactly, yes.
A paper clip can hold your place while you're writing on a template for folks with low vision.
Exactly. I buy bump dots off of Amazon to label the microwave,
Mm-hmm.
because why buy a fancy Bluetooth microwave when I can use good old-fashioned bump dots?
Yeah, right.
So typically a little more high tech, but let's talk about some of the common AT that you're going to probably encounter in these digital spaces. So you're going to, oh, with pleasure, with pleasure. Let's take a sidetrack to talk about bump dots for a second, because that's what we do in these training and TA calls.
Right.
Bump dots are little dot-shaped stick-on raised pieces of rubber. I think they're typically rubber. And they come in 3 or 4 different sizes, and you can label all kinds of things with them. Also, if your consumers are not folks who like to go to Amazon or maxi aids or independent living aids or something that requires them to order online, I'm going to tell you a funny story that might tell you a little bit about my personality. My substitute for bump dots are the little googly-eyed stick-on eyeballs that you can buy from Walmart at Halloween.
Oh,
That's got to make your kitchen look a lot more interesting.
Oh, it does. It does. It's fabulous.
yeah.
Also, if you're into bling, to use a very, millennial slang term, you can get the little stick-on rhinestones from Walmart, and those are also infinitely prettier than bump dots.
So you're
Alright.
using a raised dot that's not Braille. And what is it telling
Exactly.
you about your microwave?
So if a microwave is touchscreen,
Smooth.
yes, exactly. If it's smooth, you can't distinguish where the buttons are. So what I do, and different blind folks label things in different ways, but what I do is I put a dot on my 1, 3, 4, 6, 7, 9 start clear, so that I can distinguish where those buttons are. Now, sometimes it can make it a little tricky to press because these buttons are super sensitive, and so they're designed with just the lightest pressure needed. And so when you put a rhinestone or a bump dot or something on top of them, they get a little finicky sometimes. But just fun facts on alternative labeling techniques, because sometimes getting Braille labelers is expensive. Okay, so I'm going to detour back and let's talk about some of the AT that you're going to find in digital spaces. So you might encounter things like a sip and puff device, where someone can very carefully blow into the device and make actions happen on the computer. You might encounter various alternative keyboard layouts, which I have pictured here. You might also encounter what's called eye tracking technology, which is the coolest thing ever. It takes the movement of your eyes and converts it to carrying out actions on the computer. You have folks who are going to exclusively use voice control to control their devices. So AT in digital spaces is wide and varied. And so when we're thinking about digital accessibility, that is something to keep in mind. Okay, so earlier when I asked y'all to try your hand at digital accessibility, I used the word plain language. I said, do you want to define digital accessibility in plain language? Does anybody want to take a stab at, and I just used bad plain language by saying that, does anybody want to try defining what they think I mean by plain language?
It's something that is simple and everybody can understand it.
Exactly. Exactly. And even my plain language definition of plain language is, I tell folks, write like you speak. Take all the jargon out of it. As SILs, we love jargon. Take all the jargon out of it. Take all of the using extra words out of it. And write like you speak. Write in short sentences. Use bullet points. Don't forget to use white space, because having a ton of text all jumbled up on a page is very hard for some folks to follow.
Let's talk about serif. S-E-R-I-F. Calibri, Verdana don't have those little upturns on the T or the E. And so it's just straight print. It's like block lettering. And sometimes
Hold
it's
on to that for a second.
thick
Hold
or
on to
thin.
that.
Yeah.
We are coming to, you are on a great track.
All right.
Because that, yes. So we will revisit that thought in just a moment.
Okay.
And so remembering with plain language, depending on who your audience is, because sometimes if we're writing academic research and we're writing white papers and things like that, the jargon and the lots of words is the expectation. And I understand that, and that is understood universally as best practice. But when you're speaking to your consumers as audience, think about whether or not your consumers will benefit from plain language.
Yeah.
And remember too that plain language isn't easy the first few
Nope.
times you do it. You're going to work at it. You're going to have to put, very likely, your original document side by side with what you're writing in plain language and work at it until you eliminate all of the extraneous words. The other thing to remember is that plain language isn't always shorter. So I say that because sometimes we use words as SILs that might count as jargon, but they're words that we need to make sure our consumers with disabilities know and fully understand, because they are words that the consumers, that staff, that whomever will hear again. And so our responsibility then is not only to write in good plain language, but to use these words and define them in a way that is good plain language. Any questions about that?
Yeah, I think it's important to be consumer centered, because when I go into a doctor's office, I understand the medical jargon. I prefer that they use the precise terms as opposed to making it more simple. It confuses me. And if somebody has a memory problem, I try to listen to what the consumer, the way their language is, and how do they talk? Try to get the communication to match what theirs is. But for me, I don't like plain language in some situations. That's all.
I think that's really, really important. And I really appreciate you saying that, because when we're working with individual consumers one-on-one, we always want to be consumer centered.
Mm-hmm.
We want to make sure that we are staying with the preference of the consumer in all things. When we are putting out public facing content that is going to go to everyone, we want to be mindful that some folks are going to need plain language.
Yeah.
And so that equitable access, go ahead and just put it out there in plain language.
Mm-hmm.
Even if that means you have two versions of the content on the same page. Don't put them on separate pages necessarily, because that to me can sometimes feel a little separate but equal, which is not a pleasant feeling. But put a plain language version on the same page as your more academic version if you need to create 2 separate versions.
Dee Henry has her hand up. Dee?
Sure,
Hello.
please.
My
Hi.
name is Dee. I'm at the Center for Independent Living Options in Cincinnati. And something that I found to be helpful, and this won't work in every case, of course, but in some projects I'm working on, we're including a glossary at the beginning of what we write. And that way we try to identify some of those terms that might be hard to find a plain language version of. And it, like you said, it's important for some terms to just be made more aware to the public in general that these terms exist and stuff. So that's something that we've been doing.
I love
Nice.
that. Yes, that's an
Thank you.
excellent idea. Thank you for sharing that. And
If
that's
I could
something.
really quick, I'm
Yes,
sorry, I just,
please.
I just wanted to piggyback off what the young lady in Cincinnati just said, and that is, I'm new with working with one of the schools here in Kentucky, and I myself, as a staff member, am being overwhelmed sometimes by the new use or overuse of a lot of acronyms, almost to the point where I need a glossary just for the acronyms, and trying to share those with some of our consumers, I'm sure is just as confusing as it is for me.
Absolutely. And that's so I came to working with a SIL from a public relations background, and that's immediately one of the things that overwhelmed me as well was, okay, there are a lot of words and I don't know what all of these words mean. And I did a lot of writing notes to myself for the first year until I got my head around many of these words. So I love the glossary.
And we do have one. I've asked Dion to see if she can post it in the chat. There's actually one on our website at ilru.org. That is an independent living glossary. It won't capture all of your state specific things, but it gets most of the acronyms anyway. So hopefully.
Oh, that is wonderful. I love that.
Who is that who was just talking from Kentucky out of curiosity?
My name's Eric Evans. I'm the new housing advocate for Independence Place.
Okay, great.
We're a SIL that handles Central Kentucky.
Great. Thanks for telling me who you are, Evan. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Not a problem.
All right, so if we can slip over, Paula, to the slide labeled alternative text and image descriptions.
You've got it.
And what we're going to do now, y'all, is we're going to talk about some of these. So when I defined digital accessibility earlier, I said that it was all of the considerations that when they come together, make the internet and your digital content usable for people with disabilities. So now we're going to talk about some of these considerations individually. And we can do this, let's see. Let's do this with a raised hand reaction if that works for everybody. And Paula, if you can be my eyes for this.
Well,
how many of you before right this moment when it's about to come out of my mouth have heard the terms alternative or alt text and image description?
One, two, three, four, five, six, seven. They're going up.
Sweet.
Some are clapping. Excellent. And nine so far have said yes. That's
Excellent.
out of 60.
Excellent. So we have a really good foundation. Alt text is one of the big considerations for digital accessibility. And so what that means is that any image, whether it's on a website, in social media, in a document, etc., has to have a text description of what's going on in the image. So there are two ways to do this. There is alt text, which is in the HTML code on a website or embedded into the image on a social media post or in a document. and it is only visible to someone with a screen reader. And so your blind folks will get it, but folks with other disabilities who might really appreciate text about what's going on in the image are going to miss that. So the other option is an image description. And that shows up more like a caption. So it shows up in the body of a social media post or in the documents, in the body of the text content on a website, and it is accessible to everyone. Now, best practice for digital accessibility compliance says that all you have to have is alt text. But we talked about equitable access earlier, and that's kind of my soapbox of what we should have in an ideal world. So I recommend personally that you have both alt text and an image description. And these two things are slightly different. Alt text is usually just 1 to 3 sentences, and it gives you the most important part of an image. So for instance, black cat laying in bed. Whereas an image description can be as long as a paragraph, and it gives you the full scope of an image. So anything that a viewer can visually take in will likely be present in an image description. Again, lots of info very fast there. Any questions about that?
Whoops, sorry.
No worries. Okay. So next piece of the sort of big set of considerations, we're going to talk about colors and fonts. So you want to be very mindful of the colors you use. For example, you don't want to use blues and greens in the same space, because there may be folks who are colorblind who are going to have difficulties distinguishing between those. You also want to be very mindful that you are using colors that have a high level of contrast and that are easy to see. So later in our resources, I have a link to a free color contrast checker for you, because any text-based content you're creating, you want to make sure you're checking that color contrast. Now, this is not the case for images, as long as there's no text in the image. But if you have text that is one color on a background that is a different color, you need to be very mindful of that color contrast. And then talking about fonts. So earlier we very briefly talked about serifs on fonts, and I said, hold that thought. So serifs on fonts, a sighted friend describes this to me as they look like little decorative feet. And you want to make sure that you avoid fonts that have these little decorative curly feet, because it can make it very difficult for folks with reading disabilities to distinguish between some letters. So make sure you are using your sans serif fonts. Okay. Headings and links. For screen reader users, these are the big two. So if you take away nothing else from this presentation from the perspective of screen reader users, take this away for me. Screen reader users can navigate web pages, documents, social media, etc., by just pulling up a list of headings and links that are on the page. So it is really, really important that all of your links have really good text names. For example, don't say, click here, read more, learn more. Where's that going to take me as a screen reader user? I don't know. It's kind of like if you get a spam email and there's a link in the spam email that wants you to do something, you're not going to click the link in the spam email because you don't know where it's going to take you. That's how we screen reader users feel every time we open up a list of links that is 100 links long and just says click here. I promise. Headings are the same way. So there's a right way to use your headings, and it's called heading hierarchy or heading nesting. So if you have a document, let's think of this like a book, like a big college textbook. And the title of this big college textbook is only ever what we call heading 1. And then you have chapters in this book. And those big chapters are always only heading 2. But then let's take chapter 1 and let's say that it's divided into 3 sections. Those 3 sections are all heading level 3. And if one of those sections is divided into sections, that's heading level 4. It can go on through infinity, friends. It doesn't typically. Typically, we don't see much beyond heading level 4 or 5. But just being mindful that you're utilizing those headings, because screen reader users will love you for it. Many folks with cognitive disabilities will love you for it because they can follow where they need to go, and you're organizing your document well, using your headings, using your white space correctly. But remember too that just changing your font size and your color and maybe underlining or bolding your font is not enough. Using Microsoft Word as an example, there is a styles pane in Microsoft Word. You have to put your headings in using that styles pane. In a website, you have to put your headings in the HTML code, or a screen reader will not tag it properly as a heading. Pausing for questions, because that is very technical and very in the weeds. So any questions about that?
Again, you're small enough, we can just unmute, or you can drop it in the chat and I'll read it. Brandy asks, do you have an example document that you could share?
I can get you one, yes. Specifically, I do not have a policies and procedures example. I have a standard Microsoft Word practice document. And yes, I do have further info and reading for you in the resources section. I also, just as a general note, and sure, absolutely, I will email that practice document to Dion. And Dion, if you can figure out what the best way to disseminate that would be, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll probably insert it somehow into this document when we post it.
Beautiful.
And I know Dion works very hard to make sure our ILRU documents follow styles. And so you may be able to see some examples there, but I'm not sure what you can detect about them.
Yes. And then the other thing, what was I going to say? I just had a thought. It is in your resources, but the other thing I'm going to ask Dion, if you can toss in the chat, if you're familiar with it and I can spell it out for you, if you're not, is the link to webaim.org, webaim.org. All of this digital accessibility content in one form or fashion is on WebAIM. WebAIM is a fantastic resource, friends. It's a little bit technical in the way it is written, so you may need to sit with it and kind of work through it, but it is an excellent resource, and it is on the resources slides as well. Okay. All right, so let's move to, give me just a moment. Okay, so let's move to slide 19, designing with accessibility in mind.
You've got it.
So we're going to talk about a couple things here. So the first thing to know is that there are some automated tools out there that can help you a little bit with your digital accessibility. So when you're talking about Microsoft products, all Microsoft products have a built-in accessibility checker. When you're talking about the web, I prefer AxDev tools and the Wave testing tool. Both of those are in the resources slides. When you're talking about PDFs, that's a whole separate training, but Adobe does have an accessibility checker. When you're talking about Google products, I'm going to speak bluntly. When you're talking about Google products, don't. In the sense that Google products don't do great with accessibility, and I'm talking about the suite, Google Drive, and all of those tools. We tend to use primarily Microsoft at Able because of the accessibility. But also remember that these automated tools are a baseline. They will help you figure out the things that they can detect, but at the end of the day, they're just AI. So they will help you, they will guide you through how to fix what they can find, but they are not a substitute for having a qualified auditor with a disability on your staff who can manually check these things for you. And then, okay, give me just a minute. Hold on one second. I just had a technical difficulty. There we go. Okay. And then let's talk about my soapbox. And Paula, do me a favor and give me a time check before I go on to my soapbox.
Oh yeah, we're about out of time. So
okay. So I'm going to very, very quickly step onto my soapbox, which is this trend of what we call the digital accessibility overlay. And this is a little widget that companies are selling that can be added to your website that is, they claim can fix all of your accessibility problems. So I'm going to say this about it, and then we're going to kind of go on. But the accessibility, the web content accessibility guidelines are pages and pages and pages long. The overlays are a single line of programming code that claims to fix all of your accessibility issues. One single line of code for thousands of guidelines. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So
And that puts us at 3 minutes, Sarah.
Okay. So what I'm going to say is in the next couple of slides, there is more explanation of an overlay. So if you want to explore that on your own, absolutely feel free. And also feel free to reach out to me because I will wax poetic with you about why they're not my favorite thing. And then the next slide 22, inaccessible versus accessible content, gives you a website that you can look at that is a demo site exclusively designed to be inaccessible so that you can see what that might look like. And then we have 2 slides of resources for you that you can use for further reading, color contrast checks, automated testing, and so on. So what questions in this last bit of time can I answer for you?
And while you think of those questions, please do notice in the chat an evaluation, and also this will be up on the website shortly, 24 to 48 hours. Questions, jump in, or ICD has raised her hand.
Can you run up and find them quick?
Let's see.
Dee, would you like to jump in, or are those from past?
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. That was from earlier.
Okay, well, we'll
No
ask
worries.
Edward then, because I know his is new, I think.
Hey, I wanted to know, is there any type of bot or something in a extension that could be added to Chrome to format my emails to make sure they're more screen reader ready as far as, just getting it up to snuff so it will be able to send correctly?
So what are you using to create your emails?
Right now I'm using Microsoft Outlook.
And you are using it in Chrome?
I didn't know if there was an extension that would probably help reformat it just to make sure that the links and everything, basically, so it would kind of like set up like a template. I didn't know if there was
Gotcha.
something like that out there.
So no, there is not. You will unfortunately need to do it by hand. And what I advise for that is rather than using Outlook through the web, if you have the ability to download the desktop app, it'll give you much easier functionality to do all of the accessibility things you need to do.
Thank you.
And folks,
Absolutely.
unfortunately, I have to cut us off because our interpreters and captioners need to move on, and they're not able to do that without us saying goodbye. So check online soon. Please do your evaluation. And thanks so much for being here. What a great group. And Sarah, thank you so much for a great presentation. It was
Absolutely.
about 60 people and great content, and appreciate it from all of you.
Thank y'all so much. And we will get, yes, I saw the request for the links being emailed. Yes, we will get those emailed out to you.
They'll also be, everything will be posted as well.
Yes, thank y'all so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.